Welcome to this edition of Sea Power. Of all the naval aircraft, the Harrier jump jet is perhaps the most unique. The Harrier proved itself during the Falkland Island conflict to be one of the world's most capable seaborne weapons. Today, it's still serving in an area that only a Harrier can operate from. This is the British aircraft carrier Ark Royal. She is an invincible class carrier and the fifth vessel to bear the proud name. Ark Royal was built by Swan Hunter's Shipbuilders Yard at Wallsend in December 1978. HMS Ark Royal was accepted into service on July 1st, 1985. HMAS Ark Royal is larger than her two sisters Invincible and Illustrious. 4 Olympus gas turbine engines, similar to the Concorde's, propel the ship, which give a maximum speed in excess of 30 knots. She also has a steeper ski jump than the other ships of this class. Since the end of the Cold War, the role of the Invincible class aircraft carriers has evolved from one of sea control to maritime force protection. One of the world's most flexible fighter bombers is the air power that complements the sea power of the British fleets. The fixed-wing element born from an amalgamated force known as Joint Force Harrier consists of aircraft from both Royal Navy and Royal Air Force Harrier squadrons. The Sea Harrier's development can be traced to the Hawker P-1127, which was a single jet engine plane and was the first real workable VTOL. It was a pioneer that showed the world that a jet aircraft could take off and land like a helicopter, yet reach jet fighter speeds. This later P-1127 was called a Kestrel, and its first flight took place during March 1964, 3.5 years after the first tentative hover of the original P-1127. At the Farnborough Air Show, 2 Kestrels showed a stunned crowd what they could do. They outperformed a Hunter fighter jet. They beat the Hunter in speed, range and rate of climb. Normal jet fighters have high stall speeds, and landing one on an aircraft carrier is a difficult skill that requires much training. It also requires huge teams of people and a very sophisticated catapult system for takeoffs. On the contrary, a VTOL aircraft simply requires a flat piece of tarmac in the middle of the ocean to both land and take off from. This is due to the unique qualities of the Pegasus engine, which powers all versions of the Harrier multi-role military aircraft. It is the world's only operational STOVL, or short takeoff and vertical landing jet engine. Rolls-Royce has established unique STOVL expertise, which is being extended by the company's current work in developing the STOVL technology for the Lockheed Martin F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. The company's expertise is drawn from the bank of knowledge accumulated in developing and producing the Pegasus, power plant of the unique Harrier AV-8B family. The breakthrough to achieving reliable VTOL was indeed the Pegasus engine. It was designed by the Bristol Siddeley Company, which became part of Rolls-Royce in 1966. The uniqueness of the engine was the 4 rotatable nozzles that determined the aircraft's direction. The nozzle module is not a part of the engine as such. it's only a component. The single-jet engine was about 8 foot long. However, for its day, it was extremely powerful. With the nozzle unit already in place, the engine was lowered into the airframe. To give the plane maximum hover and landing manoeuvrability, the nozzles were arranged with 2 forward of the plane's centre of gravity and 2 rearward. 2 compressed air-driven motors were employed to drive a system of rods and chains, which moved 4 nozzles in unison. Their full rotation is 99 degrees, and they can achieve that in 1 second. To further assist, short takeoff ramps were devised. These were first tested on the ground. The ramps curve upward at about 12 degrees and increased safety. They also dramatically increase the war load that a Harrier can lift into the air over the same short run. Trials with the 2-seater version and the Sea Harrier began in 1977. Those ski jumps were not thought of when the Invincible class was built. They were all later modified with ramps. Ark Royal has its ramp set at the maximum angle. Invincible and Illustrious have their ramp set at 7 degrees. In 1963, a P-1127 had flown from the big carrier Ark Royal. In 1966, a Kestrel carried out more extensive tests from the smaller carrier Bulwark. These tests were integrated with the flying of Wessex helicopters. It was soon clear that the directions of the batsmen were not required. Numerous VTOs were conducted with the ship underway. And it was found possible to hover in the lee of the island, even with severe turbulence. Vertical landings, or VLs, were made from various approaches. The first type was from the helicopter handbook, by approaching the landing area from the left and hovering over the landing point. However, the pilots preferred a straight approach from the stern of the ship. During 1966, the government finally agreed to go ahead with the concept of this type of aircraft. From here, the Harrier was born. The first Harrier looked very similar to its predecessors, but it was a complete redesign and much more advanced. One of the earlier Harriers carried out a remarkable series of tests from the helicopter pad of the cruiser Blake. Not only was this the smallest area from which an aircraft had taken off from or landed on, it was in fact a first. Needless to say, each takeoff was vertical, as was all the landings. The ship was rolling 12 degrees and the wind was blowing 35 knots. Another problem was the ship's superstructure was creating enormous turbulence, and the Harrier even managed this. The entire program of tests went off without a hitch and was the shape of things to come. All the ship's crew and the pilots involved were most impressed at the remarkable feat the first model Harrier could achieve with such ease. When the Harrier was first ordered for the RAF, it was intended that they would operate from the last two remaining fleet carriers, Ark Royal and Eagle. In March 1970, two Harrier GR1s of the RAF conducted extended trials from the carrier Eagle. These trials were to be run to confirm the Harrier's wartime capability. As the trials proceeded, the takeoff weight of the Harriers was increased. Each takeoff was of the free-rolling takeoff mode. None were done using the ship's catapult system. Fuel tanks, bombs and rockets were carried as in a real wartime scenario, and the loads were also fired to simulated actual landing weights. Many VLs were made with the ship at full speed. The trials also included topside servicing of the aircraft and using the elevators as well as full wartime servicing of the Harriers. As a result of the trial, the RAF had clearance to operate from the carriers, and this was the first time that Air Force pilots had flown from an aircraft carrier. In the following year, 1971, No. 1 Squadron brought their Harriers aboard Ark Royal. In April 1982, war was declared between Britain and Argentina. They were fighting over the sovereignty of the tiny Falkland Islands. This conflict was to be a sea battle from Britain's viewpoint. Britain immediately called upon its carriers to be readied. Invincible and the larger Hermes set sail with all the available Sea Harriers. The Harrier was about to do battle against Mirages, Daggers and Skyhawks. Although the enemy's planes weren't as technically advanced as the Harrier, they outnumbered the jump jet by 10 to 1. The Sea Harrier's Randalls were repainted with low visibility B-type without the white, and the aircraft themselves were painted in a dull grey finish. Later, a barley grey was used as a more suitable colour for camouflage. As every aircraft had to be war ready on arrival at the Falklands, each aircraft received a full service to reduce downtime during the conflict. The armament for the aircraft was also prepared and included rocket pods, bombs and clusters. Sidewinder missiles were the main weapon for air-to-air combat. Many of the pilots had never flown in a conflict situation, and their training was about to be tested. They were about to find out how close simulation and the real thing is. 2,197 sorties were flown by a total of 28 Harriers and ended with all Sea Harriers returning safely. The planes performed faultlessly and handled the tough weather environment better than any other aircraft of its day. Only one Sea Harrier took a hit. This was small caliber fire, and the projectile passed through the Harrier's tail. The plane was flying the next day. The initial operations were conducted about 90 miles east of the islands. The first target was a bombing and strafing sortie to take out Stanley Airfield at dawn on May the 1st.
Intenso.
From Port Stanley, the Harriers came under fire from many different calibers of gun, and from Roland and Tiger surface-to-air missiles.
Aproximadamente se encuentra el aeropuerto. Estaría en llamas en este momento. Otro avión más. Misiles nuestros se dirigen en busca del avión enemigo.
This operation was an outstanding success. Unfortunately, the British naval ships didn't have as much luck, as HMAS Sheffield and HMAS Coventry were lost. Both were hit by the French-built Exocet missile, which was fired from low-flying aircraft. The Exocet proved itself a very capable anti-ship weapon in this conflict. The British ships were lost to the air-launched version. There is also the ship-launched and submarine-launched types. The missile is rocket-propelled and has a range of 26 miles. After launching, the missile moves around until it reaches its target's heading. It then descends until it is surface skimming by using the inertia guidance platform and radar alternator. When the target is 6 miles away, the ADAC radar in the nose cone activates and sweeps the area until it finds its target. Once locked on, the ADAC radar steers the projectile to hit the vessel at the optimum height above the waterline. The NN40 is a larger version and has a slightly longer range. The SM39 is a submarine version and is fired in a special container from torpedo tubes. AM39 is the aircraft version, and over 100 of these were fired by Argentina in the Falklands conflict. Sea Harriers are equipped with the Big Sea Eagle anti-ship missile. This large missile had a range of over 70 miles and was radar capable. The entire radar was located in the missile's nose. Only the large carriers were able to withstand the explosive power of the Sea Eagle. The Sea Harriers were also fitted with the devastating 2-inch rockets. This is a demonstration of a training exercise on a towed target. These rockets could be launched 72 at a time from 2 pod launchers. This weapon was used extensively in the Falklands campaign. The Sea Harrier also carried the short to medium version of the Sidewinder air-to-air missile. The missile could dispatch an enemy at a range of about 8 miles. Toss bombing and horizontal laydown bombing was also possible with the Sea Harrier. Another of the Harrier's weaponry that was used in the Falklands campaign is the BL-75 cluster bomb dispenser. These are ideal weapons to take out airfields. Today, the Harrier GR7As, part of the Joint Force Harrier based at RAF Cottesmore, have been deployed in Afghanistan since September 2004. They have been constantly engaged in supporting the International Security Assistance Force in rebuilding Afghanistan. Both naval and maritime groups of the Harriers of No. 3 Squadron operate from Canada Air Base, in one of the most hostile environments in this war-torn barren province. The squadron maintains crews at 30 minutes notice to launch throughout the daylight hours to fly in support of coalition forces. The insurgent and anti-government forces operate in the towns and remote mountainous regions in the southern provinces and along the Pakistani border. The Harrier GR7A carries enhanced paveway projection guided bombs, rockets and Maverick missiles, as well as numerous sensors and defensive flares. However, it is testament to the resolve of the crews and physical presence of such a capable aircraft that they only had to resort to deploying munitions on less than 14 operations. The Harriers frequently support pre-planned missions against the insurgents. US Army troops who have been ambushed in this most hostile of environments regularly contact the Harrier crews to thank them for their outstanding support. The deployed operating base accommodates approximately 5,000 coalition forces. The overall British attachment has 6 Harrier GR7As and a total of around 180 personnel. The base is 3,300 feet above sea level, which also presents the aircraft with performance issues, and coupled with high winds and dust makes the aircraft engineer's life extremely difficult. The US forces are slowly rebuilding the runway, but currently the Harrier is the only fast jet fighter that is able to operate in these conditions, and is the sole asset readily available to support coalition troops on the ground. Often, there is less than 3,500 feet of runway available from which to operate. And even this regularly breaks up with the force of the Harrier's powerful Rolls-Royce Pegasus engines. Join us again next time for when we set sail again on a voyage of adventure aboard Sea Power.